Hey, everybody. I'd like to thank you all for being here today. Hope everybody had a nice holiday season, no matter how you celebrated it. It's actually kind of hard to believe that we've made it through 2020, just a few days to go. It's been quite the year, and I feel this is a really important topic to kind of end on. It's something we all do pretty daily. We all love craft beer, and that involves the consumption of some sort of craft beer. But I want to talk about, alcoholism today and the problems and symptoms and things we can do to help ourselves be better and help others in the industry just live a safer life. And we're going to start with some intros. And Zach, thanks for being here today. Once again, I do like your shirt. So great shirt you picked out today. Now, Zach, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, apparently Andrew and I have very similar tastes. Hey, everybody. My name is Zach Jewell. I'm the founder of a men's mental wellness organization called Into the Dark Blue. And we are in the process of building a network of men's groups at independent breweries around the country.
I hope to meet you next year when things are a little bit more safer and we're all traveling a little bit more. Looking forward to it.
Likewise.
Danii, pleasure having you here today. You stay busy, I know. Oh, Danii, you're muted.
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me better now? Awesome. Yes. Hi, I'm Danii Oliver. I am the founder of Island to Island Brewery, House of Juice, Brooklyn Gen Brew, and BEERSGIVING. It is a pleasure to have been asked to be on this panel today because, like Zach, my focus is on supporting people in the industry by addressing the taboos and the traumas that exist that keep a diverse audience out of craft beer. And alcoholism is definitely one of those traumas and taboos that need to be discussed.
Well, thank you again for being here. And Will, your turn.
Yeah, I'm Will Ryan. I'm from Blaze Brewing Company. I'm the brand and sales manager there. I spend probably on non-COVID times about 3 weeks on the road every month. So I definitely have certain ways of dealing with these kind of like harder things when it comes to the need or kind of the way that industry people handle events and the travel and kind of the stress that comes with that.
Well, thanks for being here today. And Alison, I've seen you a little bit lately, and unfortunately, I have to see you again later today as well as part of another presentation twice today. Hard to believe, right? But you're up. For everyone who hasn't caught you before, tell everybody a little bit about why you're here today.
Awesome. I am Alison Wisneski from Lady Justice Brewing in Aurora, Colorado. And I apologize, my cat is joining conversationally. And I am the director of marketing. And I come from a family of alcoholics. And so I hold this conversation really near and dear to my heart of how do we not put our traumas into our space while we're taking care of our customers and our members.
No, thanks as always for joining the conversation. And Tom, I really enjoyed our phone call the other day, learning more about you and well-being. But if you could tell everybody a little bit about what you do in the industry.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Tom Halaska. I'm one of the partners at WellBeing Brewing. We're one of the country's first craft non-alcoholic brew companies, which is super exciting. My job is sales, marketing, you name it. But also part of my charge too is to just bring awareness of, getting people to be a little bit more mindful about how they're consuming alcohol, how our product can mix into a session of people who are consuming alcohol, just to kind of try and find that balance. And really just, like I said, just kind of bringing awareness to the world of balance has really been the most exciting thing that I've been able to do with the company so far.
No, we're excited to have you here as well. And for everybody listening after the fact on Spotify, Tom has a great Christmas tree with nice blue lights in the background. So just close your eyes, imagine getting that holiday spirit, get a little positivity going right now. Yeah. But I want to first talk about, the role of drinking in craft beer. We all work in the industry. I imagine we all love drinking of some sorts. Tom, even, those well-being beers you're making, you're a huge part of craft beer these days. The rise of not an alcoholic is extremely fascinating to follow. But, looking at that consumption, when does the social drinking we do at a brewery, also the quality control we do, throughout the day to make sure the beer tastes fine, When does all of this change from a social activity? You know, a lot of people think of craft beer as almost a hobby. When does it go from that to more, we hit the overconsumption levels and it becomes a problem? You know, what's the difference between a few beers while you're at the brewery and becoming, you know, something you should worry about? And at this point in time, anyone jump on in.
I really think that it's almost always after the fact that we find out that there's a problem. And more importantly, it's individualized. There is no blanket statement that we can say, hey, at this point, that's when the problems start. You know, each and every one of us have our own struggles and our own issues day to day. One week might be great, the next week might not be. And I think that really focusing in on the individual that works at the brewery and making sure and checking in and making sure that they're okay consistently before it gets out of control, before you're like, oh yeah, we saw the signs, man. Well, I wish we would have done something a month ago. I think just that active check-in and being able to have the conversations that are really difficult in your mind beforehand, but actually when you get into those conversations of just asking someone how they're doing or being really open and honest with them, those conversations actually wind up being pretty easy and you can head a lot of this stuff off at the pass.
I agree. It all starts with conversation. Conversation is not always easy to be had. You never know how a person will take it, whether or not you're overstepping your boundaries. I have always treated it as a rule of thumb. If you're in my space, then you're on my time. And when I was in New York, it had very strict laws on alcohol awareness, blood alcohol intoxication. And that responsibility fell not just on the business owners, but on the bartenders themselves. So if someone got drunk in your space, left and went anywhere else, you were responsible for them. If the cops can trace them back to you, it was your responsibility. So I always took that very, very seriously. And we watched our customers like a hawk, not to make them feel uncomfortable, but, you know, how quickly do you reserve a drink? You know, this is not fast casual service. This is relaxation. This is third space. It's slow. It's intimate. And so we enacted things like that to make the service slow, to make the conversation long. We didn't have TVs, which allowed people to just, you know, slosh back. It was more engaged and more focused on the person's interaction. And that's really highly detailed, but it is, and it is planned that way because it was our responsibility and it mattered to us to take care of our customer so that they would keep coming back. We didn't want to create alcoholics of our customers, whether they be consumers or industry professionals.
That's really cool. That's a really cool concept with that and not having the TVs and everything. I think the allure of craft beer can sneak up on you pretty quickly. I think it did for me when I was younger. And just there's so many options. There's so many different things we can taste and so many different ways they're made and all this. And I think it's easy for it to become a habit because it's a hobby. You know, we've got things like Untapped and we're sharing and always posting our beers with people. And it's like almost like a when we're younger, we have like a fad. Yeah, exactly. Like Pogs was when we were younger. But yeah, I think it's easy to kind of creep up on you and fill your fridge full of craft beers just in the name of art or in the name of the hobby and go home and have a beer every night and all of that. And not necessarily, you know, get to a point where you're not necessarily around people, but you're just, you know, doing your hobby.
I also think there's a fair amount to do with kind of the culture that a lot of breweries have created, where it's a lot of gluttonous beers, whether that be pastry stouts or these smoothie sours and stuff like that. And then a lot of the food that, if this brewery is serving food, is serving, it kind of starts this very unhealthy cycle that, you know, like we said, is something that, you know, you may see develop, but I think it also lies with the person, who the person themselves, to kind of understand, not necessarily the missteps, but having a more wellness minded and more moderation minded point of view I'm young, I'm 26. And when I entered this industry at 21, there wasn't a lot of that kind of information. There was just a lot of, you got to try all these beers, you got to hit all these spots, and you got to talk to all these people. And with that, kind of comes this very hedonistic lifestyle that has a focus on networking, but also necessarily isn't the healthiest for your physical or mental health.
And you guys all touched on something that's, really prevalent in craft beer. There's so many different styles of beer. Will, you mentioned like pastry stouts, and if you had to throw out a number, what's the average ABV of the last pastry stout that you've had? Yeah, I see a 10 there. Zach put his fingers up in the air, and that's right. I remember when I was in elementary school and I was in DARE. I don't know if you guys had DARE where you were growing up, like drug abuse resistance education. I remember them showing you a picture. It was a shot equals a glass of wine equals a beer. And, the current state of just alcohol in general, I don't think that stands very true. Because I think in those examples, they were like, every beer is going to be 5%. And every glass of wine and liquor is going to have the same ABV as the next one. But that's not really how it is. If you go to a local brewery and you have, a Pilsner and it's, 4.5%, or you go the next day and you have that pastry stout that's 10.5%, those beers are not the same in that little picture. And I think that's a big thing we use to kind of justify what we're doing. We say, oh no, I only had 2 drinks. But, my wife's gotten the habit of asking me, what's the ABV of those 2 drinks? It's not just, did you have 2 beers? It's, what's the alcohol content? Because that plays effect on how you're going to respond to this. So talking about alcoholism in craft beer, just general overconsumption. I know, Zach, you mentioned earlier, what are the signs people should look for if they think they may have a problem with their consumption levels? And what are some of the things, we should consider, as consumers ourselves who are sampling the products, of course, when we get to the point of maybe we should rethink our habits?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually one of the things that we're trying to really highlight with Into the Dark Blue is getting people to recognize and know themselves and what their limits are. And I think that's probably one of the things that we lack the tools for the most, is to be able to recognize our own limits. And because we want to, sometimes we want to escape and we want to look cool or whatever the case may be. And so we just keep going. And we don't know when the switch flips and it's just like, what, it's time to stop. So, I think it's really important to be able to limit yourself to, a glass or 2 of beer, and making sure it's not every day. I think that's a pretty good marker to start with.
I always watch for symptoms that I see in myself. And so again, as I had shared earlier, and I'm sure as many folks who are watching this, who will watch this, who will hear this later, growing up in a family with alcoholics, we watch for the signs and telltale symptoms that we were raised with to watch for. And so it's always my automatic, but I think that it's exactly right. Alcoholism is not one size fits all. Addiction is not one size fits all. And so you have to watch for the things that feel potentially foreign to you, to then keep an eye out for. And so something that, like, for me, as a child of alcoholics, but as someone who lives in this Al-Anon world of control issues because of that, I now know what works for me, which is don't drink during the week. And if you are, so like this evening is a perfect example. We have the Craft Beer Professionals holiday party, and it's like, okay, so I've planned ahead for that and I know I'm going to have a beer. Setting the boundaries for yourself that feel good, that feel comfortable, and then sharing with others. So like I share that with my partner, I share that with my friends, so that if they see me going outside of that, I've given them permission to say, hey, pop in and check in, see if I'm doing okay, ask if something's going on. Don't depend on just yourself, and recognize that most likely you have a community of people around you who want to see you survive and thrive. So like, what are the ways in which you set yourself up for success by alerting
Yeah,
us.
I think
And Alison, you mentioned your family. Alison, you mentioned your family history. When did you yourself realize this is something you will have to be concerned about in your life? What moment did that happen?
A really big moment for me. My mom passed away. It'll be 4 years ago this March, unexpectedly. I had gone to visit her a few months prior to her passing, and drinking was a part of that conversation of, should you be drinking when you're taking this medicine? Those types of conversations are really hard to have. And then witnessing how my family reacted to the death by coping with drinking was this big light bulb moment for me of, okay, so this is a thing that runs in my family, that my grandfather's the head of the AA group back in my tiny hometown. Like it's just a thing. And so two things for me were, I own a brewery and I want to keep that brewery in good standing and have a good reputation. So instead of people thinking, oh, Alison, she comes from that family that knocks them back, like they can look and be like, oh, she's handling it well. Lady Justice is doing well. Those types of things are important to me on behalf of our business. But then also, for me, it was starting Al-Anon and going to talk to other people whose families and friends have issues with alcohol and saying, I need help understanding how I can look for signs, what I can do for myself. That was a really hard step to take. But the death of a loved one will do that to you, to be like, okay, time to jump off that edge and do the thing you're scared of. So I'm so glad I did it. And, now I have tools and things that I can use for myself. When I see something that's happening in the tap room, along with my tip certification, exactly what you were saying, Danii, like, how am I creating a space that says, we want you to be around in general and for your health. So how can we make that happen for you? Making lower ABV beers, creating a space that's conversational and hangout worthy post-COVID, right? It's a conversation on our minds at all time. We say great beer, better world is our slogan because we want to be able to partner with nonprofits and say, we want people to have 2 beers at your event and be okay to drive afterward. That's important to us. We don't want to be associated with something that goes poorly. Thinking ahead protects you from having issue later or blow up in your face.
No, Alison, thank you for sharing all that, and really sorry about your mom. We're going to dive a little bit more into some of the later points you made in just a moment, but Tom, I'd love to hear from you right now.
Yeah, Alison, you're awesome. That, being able to sit here in this group and be that vulnerable is amazing. Things that she touched on, that peer accountability. Having a circle of friends that when you say, hey, I'm not drinking tonight, they don't give you the, oh, come on, why not? What, are you pregnant? What, are you sick? Alcohol is one of the few drugs that we have to defend not using. And I think that surrounding yourself with people who understand that, hey, this is a choice that I am making. I'm going to support my friend in that choice, I think is really important. And the second thing that she said that was amazing is, it starts with her. With her brewery, she sets the standards, she sets the guidelines. Danii said it too. This is my ship. You are on my ship and you will abide by my rules because we want you to be safe. We want you to have fun. But if you have a brewery owner who has an alcohol addiction themselves, you're going to see that reflected in their atmosphere and in what they're doing. When I ran bars, I wasn't as responsible as Danii. I was pouring the 120 proof drinks. I was trying to get people drunk because I was trying to get people to participate in my own alcoholism. So when I looked at them, I saw myself and everything was okay. So it really does start at the top. And I think that's absolutely amazing, without a doubt. And I think that through all of that, if we can start at the top, have a group of friends who support you, that you can really make a difference. And Dry January around the corner is a perfect way. We, as people who drink, or those that do drink, they know what their tolerance is on the alcohol side, right? They push it. They see how many drinks they can have. They see how far. They know where their tolerance is up here. But I think a lot of times they're scared to see what their tolerance is down here. So, taking a month to just say, hey, I'm not going to drink this month. Maybe you only make it 2 days. Maybe you don't make it more than 12 hours. Taking that inventory and making a clear decision on where you stand with alcohol. Maybe you make it the whole month and you're like, holy hell, I got a good grip on my alcohol consumption. This is great. Taking the time to reflect and see what you can do personally while also getting support from your friends and colleagues, I think is ridiculously important.
It's been fascinating to watch things like Dry January grow in popularity over the past few years, and credit to anyone who's doing that in January. But, for everyone who's not ready to acknowledge, they may have an issue with alcohol, I think that kind of just goes back to the fact that we're not having conversations like this enough in craft beer. Now, for everyone who's actually at a brewery today or just, have feelings on it in general, why do you believe we're not talking about this? Danii?
I think my answer segues from what we were talking about before into this. And this is a question that I've struggled with for a long time. As a person who serves health, who serves green juice and smoothies alongside beer and kombucha, people have always looked at me and said, you can't do that. You can't mix beer and health. You can't mix alcohol and health. And I've always challenged them to ask them why and what's the difference? What is the difference between juice and beer? And no one answers that question. They never get it. The answer, by the way, is simply time. But what I find in especially American culture and American people is that no matter how many times you present them with options, no matter how many times we want to have the conversation, our society is designed in a way that hurts people so badly to the core that they would much rather poison themselves in the pursuit of happiness than anything else. When we look at the year that we're in and the fact that everyone is scared about their health and terrified about literally dropping dead because of what they heard on the news, not because what they researched. And then you go outside and you see the lines around places like Chick-fil-A and McDonald's. You have to ask yourself, like, what is this? What is creating this extreme fear for your health and your livelihood, yet this extreme poisoning of oneself simply because you're gonna die sometime? I had hoped that 2020 would have helped people to wake up and see, hey, we need to have more conversation around how we treat ourselves, how we take care of ourselves, what we put in our bodies. I had hoped that it would be a good time for BEERSGIVING to really launch forward into these traumas and taboos because we're presented with them. But what I found is that life is so darn difficult and damn near impossible at times that the only way we can find pleasure is in all of the vices. Overconsumption of sex, overconsumption of media, overconsumption of alcohol, overconsumption of things that are not even food that we chew on. They excite our hormones and our brain in a way that just makes us feel like, I could not kill myself immediately right now. Maybe I'll do it slowly. So to answer your question, it's hard when we look at the social aspect, because I feel like those things need to be addressed. And we don't currently have the mechanisms in our society to address them in order to have healthy conversations, especially when it comes to one looking at themselves or us sitting down and being open to it as a community.
Danii, that was extremely powerful. Thank you for sharing all that. Wow, that was fantastic. I want to go back one point you made about your brewery. You talk about how you serve things like smoothies alongside the beer because, the healthy aspects can go alongside beer. In a prior world, breweries, like you mentioned, are third spaces, or people go to visit with their community. They're not places people necessarily go to just have beer. People go for events. We're going for concerts, trivia, whatever it may be. Oftentimes people end up at a brewery because of those events rather than the actual beer. So the fact that they're consuming a smoothie versus beer, it shouldn't matter, because we always talk about community and craft beer. We can improve on that a ton in so many different ways, but no one should be judged by going to a brewery to enjoy a craft beer. So I think it's fantastic that you do that. Will, were you unmuting yourself there?
Yeah. And just to kind of like expand on that like community portion, I do think, there's not a lot of going to different breweries right now, but there's a lot of definitely drinking that I see on Facebook on a lot of these like craft beer fan pages, and a lot of that's like, whether it be New England or Mid-Atlantic or something like that. Those are just the two that like I'm kind of in. And honestly, like it's insane to see how much people consume. And I don't necessarily think that maybe we do a good enough job letting them know how that alcohol is going to affect their health. Because it's funny, it's like I grew up with the same DARE program where it's like 5% beer, and it's like now literally if I had to like think of, I'm in Maine, if I had to think of like what most people drink as a normal beer, it's a 7% IPA, and it's like that is more caloric and that has obviously more alcohol, so it has a more inebriating effect. And to me, it's just interesting to see the consumer culture around it, because I don't necessarily think the consumer culture really wants to engage with this idea of it being alcoholism, because they have been able to transform this kind of product into a hobby. And I mean, we're all in craft beer, and it all makes us, it's our living. So it's hard to tell the consumer anything negative. But it's also this like, when are people going to kind of realize that some of their lifestyles and some of their consumption or overconsumption is leading to mental and physical health struggles.
And Ryan, Will, sorry. I saw something that ties in directly to what you talked about. People are just consuming so much, posting about it on the internet. I received an email recently for an upcoming virtual beer festival. They're going to ship you nearly 20 beers to enjoy while you're enjoying the digital content. I don't know after half those beers if I can enjoy much digital content, but what are your thoughts on events like that? I mean, whether it's an in-person beer festival or a virtual beer festival where you're getting sent nearly 20 beers, and obviously in the current time, we're not sharing with a ton of friends right now. It'd be you and another person or maybe a third friend, but that's a lot of alcohol to consume in one, afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, I've always approached fests as like kind of the most gluttonous way to spend a Saturday. And I think that it is awesome. I think the community at those events is incredible, but I do think that like there is definitely an undercurrent of people deliberately, or not deliberately, but over serving themselves because they want to, tick everything, or they might want to have everything. And I mean, especially if you're, a brewer, or if you're, a salesperson at one of these festivals, it is hard because, it's the night before the festival and what happens after the festival and what happens the day after the festival that can all kind of like compound. And if you're not doing, what Alison suggested, and, holding yourself personally accountable and telling other people around you to hold you personally accountable, it definitely can make for like a very steep slope, and kind of, get the ball rolling downhill, mental health wise, in not a good way.
Yeah, definitely. We're actually about to do one of those virtual beer festivals called Pints of Love, and they have a beer bouquet that you can pick up. It's a Valentine's Day based thing. It's a beer bouquet you can pick up. It's like, I think 12 beers total. And that's again, what it comes down to, I think, is the tools. And I've been hearing that word a lot on this conversation so far, is tools. And the tools to know your limits, and like, okay, I don't have to drink all of these beers right now. I can watch the brewers talk about their beers and then drink them later, And so I think that's a big part of what we're all here for, is to help provide those tools, because we live in a society that doesn't provide tools for people to take care of themselves. Right. You're talking about consumer society. It's a peer pressure society. And we're really just kind of going along being told what to eat, told what to drink, and not a lot of people are talking about what we should be eating, should be drinking, and that stuff's not readily accessible. It's expensive to get a trainer, it's expensive to get a nutritionist, and we can't learn without having the desire to learn. And that, I think that's a big part of what we're here for, is to provide those tools. I mean, to start those conversations, it's on us, right? Like we're the ones at the top trying to start those conversations. And so, it's just about taking that responsibility and doing what we can with it.
And so I'm in a unique position in this new craft non-alcoholic beer world, that I see something that I think a lot of people that are watching don't even know exist, which are the non-alcoholic craft non-alcoholic Facebook groups. So it's non-alcoholic craft beers is a group in particular with over 5,000 members. And you know what they're doing? They're posting pictures of the new beers that they found. They're trading with their friends. They're stocking their refrigerators with craft NA beer. They're participating in the culture that they have missed out on because they decided not to drink. And through that process, a whole new group of people have started to come in, which are people who consume. They're like, oh man, we've tried this craft NA beer. It's amazing. We want to be a part of this culture too. And I'll tell you what, sometimes you get into these craft beer Facebook groups and they can be a little toxic, right? This group is ridiculously healthy. They're there to support, even if the beer's bad. There are no drain dumpers. There are no, boy, this beer's crap. There is none of that. There's honest opinions about what they think, and there's support and there's caring. And that's what community is, right? It doesn't, the alcohol portion of it, the ethanol portion of it isn't what the community is about. It's about that baseball card collecting style behavior, that camaraderie with your friends, finding the Pokemon card, the reflector card in your deck. It's all of that stuff. So that exists in that craft NA beer community, which is still part of the beer community as a whole. And I think it's starting to bleed, the lines are starting to bleed back and forth between beers that have alcohol and beers that don't. If you're sending out a 12 beer bouquet, there should be a sparkling water or an NA beer or a cold brew or something in there that says, hey, we're sending you 12 beers. We don't want you to drink 12 beers. Here are a couple of things mixed inside of there that maybe can help you balance that out and go through that. So it's neat to have this kind of newbie looking in as we've kind of created this new beer category that's absolutely exploding, that is blending itself to the non-drinker and the drinker, just to show that, hey, as you find out that overconsumption of alcohol really isn't all that healthy, you can still be a part of the craft beer community. You don't have to drink alcohol every day to be a part of this community. And I think that's really powerful.
Absolutely, Tom. And Tom and I actually met that non-alcoholic beer group, and I have to agree with him wholeheartedly. The non-alcoholic beer groups on Facebook are some of the most positive environments I've ever been in part of. You guys have all been in the beer groups, the regular craft beer groups on Facebook. And a lot of times, if you're not drinking the coolest, most double dry hop, sours, pastry style, whatever you can find, people are judging you. And one of my favorite things about some of the non-alcoholic beer groups, you might have someone who's a recovering alcoholic in there say, hey, I really used to love Bud Light. I really used to love Heineken. Besides O'Doul's, what should I drink? And instead of people coming in there saying, hey, oh, you drink Bud Light, get out of here, people are literally saying, hey, I think you'll really like this, or you'll really like this. It's so positive. There's so much, people trying to help others. And, even if you don't support and drink the non-alcoholic beer out there, I recommend taking a peek at these groups because they're doing a really killer job of putting a great culture out there. And Tom, when you and I spoke last week, you made a statement. Yeah, Danii, they're doing a killer job. Tom made a really neat statement for me because I enjoy the non-alcoholic beer myself. And he was saying, like you mentioned a minute ago, I want WellBeing to be, I think you said, your best third beer. Can you talk a little bit about, or correct me with my expression, what you meant by the best third beer?
I see Danii smiling. I know she knows exactly what I'm talking about. So, as someone comes into her space and they have a beer and they have their second beer and it's been 20 minutes and they're about to get their third beer, it's an opportunity to say, hey, so let's slow you down just a bit. Try this IPA from XYZ NA Brewery. Take a minute to take a break, and also it keeps your palate focused. You're not drinking a sugary sweet drink. You're not changing the direction from drinking craft beer, but you're balancing out where your consumption lies. So we do say we're the best third beer. So have 2 beers with alcohol, have 1 of my beers. Have a beer with alcohol, have 2 of my beers without, there's a balance. There's a sweet spot there that I never looked for as a bartender. I was always trying to get you as high as I possibly could, as quickly as I could, versus finding out where that balance is and what the actual individual person needs. So, as we in St. Louis, when we started, the Craft Brewers Guild of St. Louis came to our launch event with open arms and hugs, saying, you are here, you are welcome, you are a part of this community, you are brewers, you are doing everything that we are doing and more. And we support you and we want you to be a part of what we're doing. And I think that's just it. Finding a way, if you're shipping 20 beers to somebody for a beer festival, you have some responsibility there, just the same way you do if you're behind the bar. If you're behind the stick shirt serving beer after beer after beer, and that person goes out and gets hurt, like Danii said, you're responsible for that. At the same time, if you're shipping out 20 beers to somebody for a beer festival, there needs to be a note, something in there that says, hey, this isn't for today. This is for you to enjoy across the board. And I think taking those steps at the beginning, as we are in this weird topsy-turvy world, and we're all just trying to get by. The breweries are trying to figure out how to do events. I think shipping beer to someone's house is amazing. We do it all the time. And I think being able to have people still be able to engage in their community is important. But there has to be some responsibility inside of that that says, hey, we're giving you this, but here's how we think you should use it. Or, hey, just be responsible. Think about what you're doing. And I think that third beer idea of just finding that balance has been really, really forceful across the country in the past 3 years.
No, I think that's fantastic, Tom. And, from someone on the non-alcoholic side, what's your prediction for the coming year with regard to seeing more NA beers carrying in actual craft breweries?
Before the bad times, I don't think there was a brewery in St. Louis that didn't carry our beers, and in Chicago and in Nashville and in Denver and really across the country, because we're able to provide something to the consumer to make them feel like they're participating. When we started, there were 3 breweries, there were 6 craft NA beers in the country when we started, and now there's close to 40, 50 different styles. This is something that exists. It's something that isn't going anywhere. And the whole purpose behind it is to try to help people still be able to participate in the craft beer world that has been so important to so many. So I really think as time moves forward, you're going to see cold brews on tap, kombuchas on tap, craft NA beers on tap, smoothies. I love that smoothie idea. It's about having that treat, right? It's not about consuming alcohol, it's about sitting there with your buddies, having something special that isn't just sitting in your fridge at home. So a smoothie or a stout or a glass of wine or something that lets you know that this moment is special and significant. It doesn't have to contain alcohol to do that.
That's a fantastic point, because being in craft beer, you feel like you've worked so hard some days, you deserve that beer at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, you could have that smoothie as well and just find something else that you enjoy to celebrate that moment. And at this point, I want to turn it over to Danii, Will, and Alison, because you guys are all actively in breweries. I would love to hear what you do to build these relationships with your staff and everyone, your staff in particular, to let them know that you're there for them, or you train them on safe serving, you train them on taking care of themselves. How do you approach these conversations with those closest to you in your brewery?
I guess I'll start. So obviously everyone who comes into our space and works for us is tip certified. We work with, we have a great team on the front of house, a lot of like people who have worked in bars and restaurants for a long time, who honestly have been around the block and understand what these kinds of signs of people over imbibing look like. And for our staff, honestly, I mean, we keep clear lines of communication. I tell them, that we're there for them in whatever way, and that they, can come to us if they need anything. And, we check in with each other, and we try and foster, a sense of family as best you can in a working environment. And then I guess on the other side is, I mean, we're not, monitoring people's consumption necessarily, because we don't really have to. I feel like if it got to that point, someone would certainly say something to us. But, we try to encourage people to, live a healthy lifestyle, both mentally and physically. And, mentally, I feel like the way to do that as an employer is to be encouraging and thoughtful in the way that you speak to people, and be goal oriented, but also always thank them for their work, and show them how much you appreciate them, because I feel like if they're able to get that kind of validation at work, then I hope that can kind of add to their well-being, and hopefully make them feel good. And, when you're feeling good, hopefully you're not necessarily as likely to, abuse alcohol.
Will, have you had any situations where you had to talk to any staff members about overconsuming?
Honestly, no. We definitely had issues at other breweries that I was at, and those issues were not dealt with by me. I know that they were dealt with. I do think that there is this kind of like taboo where it's like, you know, you can have a problem, but until it manifests itself in like, you know, say like legal action or like, you know, a rock bottom event, you can kind of skirt by. And honestly, I feel like, you know, the reason for that, you know, in the past, you know, 4 or 5 years is because of the fact that craft beer has continued to see this rapid, you know, this rapid growth, and people's HR departments and people's hiring practices might not be as robust as what, you know, in their head, because in their head they're trying to expand and they're trying to make more money and they're trying to, you know, pay people and deal with, you know, deal with things that are happening every day and not necessarily the bigger picture. But I mean, I can tell you, if we did, you know, it would be one of these things where we tried to foster a community where we encourage them to, you know, get help and seek help, and then also, you know, feel like they can talk to us about it, and also ask them how we can, you know, make them feel comfortable in our environment.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Now, Alison, how about Lady Justice? How do you talk to your staff about things like overconsumption, or just, you know, keeping them positive to avoid situations like this?
So we are a very small team. We literally just hired 2 part-time beer tenders a couple of months ago for the first time. It's just been the founding team since 2014. So we were very tight-knit. Our 3 founders, Kate, Jen, and Betsy, we have these conversations often and intimately. Like, we're talking about it a lot. The folks on our production team, same thing. So it's a constant conversation for us, and especially for us. I apologize. My cat is having a lot of feelings, so he's been meowing a lot. So it's an important conversation for us to have as women in the industry as well. I think that that's an overlooked part of this conversation, that there's this idea that women need to drink more to keep up with men. I see it happen so much surrounding beer festivals. And that part's really tough to see, to say you don't have to keep slamming a bunch of high ABV IPAs to show that you like hoppy beer. Like, that's a very silly concept that we see celebrated in craft beer groups, especially in local ones. I don't think it's necessary. So we like to have that conversation as well. And then we try to meet our team as well as our folks drinking our beer where they are, to say, what are ways that we can give you a little bit less alcohol, but you want to try a bunch of different things? So we get 8-ounce twisty can tops, you know, so that it's take home a flight, try all these beers, but you don't have to make it 12 beers that you take home. Like, what are the ways that we can make that easy for our folks to consume, as well as our staff to say, hey, if you want to try these, actually take out those taster glasses and just give a sip. Tell me the hop profile that you're getting. Those types of things that encourage smaller amounts.
No, Danii, I love to hear what you do at Island to Island to help, you know, keep your staff aware of issues like this.
I think, like Alison and Betsy, my team has been small for the most part in New York. Not a lot. So craft beer wasn't really popular in New York when I was there. So I didn't have people who wanted to work in craft beer clamoring at my door. The folks who came to me were general bartenders or people who were interested in the idea of health and consumption being married together. So the people who I attracted were by default witch herbalists, apothecarians. They were already interested in what I was already doing. So I didn't have to like develop a way to talk to them about it, because for most of my staff, I was the one introducing them to craft beer. I was introducing them to the idea of made local spirits. And when you have something that's crafted and made the way it is by small producers, it's not going to F you up as much as the big commercial stuff, because we have certain considerations. We use better ingredients. There's less chemical poisoning that happens. So by default, the nature of the products we sold were different. And we always approached our service in a different way. So how do we talk to the consumer about this different thing that they can't get anywhere, that they can't experience, from a store. It was about having those conversations. How do we sell this weird stuff that we have? And the conversation would start with a shot of garlic juice or a shot of ginger juice. And it would show my staff just how much of an experience you can have with something that's non-alcoholic. And that always blew their minds. That always blew the consumer minds. Like, why are you giving me this black water to drink right now? This is really weird. But it had a conversation behind it. It showed people how their bodies can feel when they take in things that are non-alcoholic. And so the conversation was always ongoing. It was always, how do we break up the monotony of sip, sip, get another, sip, sip, get another? And it would be interrupted with things like I just mentioned that were non-alcoholic. Like you had mentioned, Tom, the third beer. Well, we had tasters in between. So that was how I had that conversation with my staff. Also, unlike most breweries, I'm not that nice. I don't give out free beers or shift beers. So yeah, if you wanted to drink, you had to pay for it, or you'd have to drink the King's beer, which was all the runoff beer from pulling the first tap line. So if you want a free beer, you can drink the King's, which was usually nasty. But we tried to keep it fun and interactive in that way, so that we were never having a hard conversation about drinking too much or a hard conversation about where you are in their life. I also talked to my staff a lot about their personal life, which my partner did not like. But I thought it was important that if they were taking on the burdens of our customers, that they needed a way to lay their burdens down as well. And let's keep it real. Beer bartending does not really give you the income level to have a therapist. So I did my best to be their bartender or their therapist, so that when something was really bugging them in their life that they might have wanted to turn to the bottle for, they could get it off their chest, be it before work on a slow day or staying after hours and be like, you know what, this was a really hard day. Let's talk before we grab something from behind the bar.
No, Danii, I love that. During Panel Fest recently, we had a conversation on just being a successful boss. And one of the points that one of the panelists made was, for all of his life, he had heard that don't become friends with the people you work with. But I think just from what you said in this conversation, having personal relationships with those around you, and I don't think craft beer is an exception. I think it's, a good thing to do. Alison, you're close with everyone you work with. Danii, you're a therapist to some of the people, who are alongside you at your brewery. It's getting to know these people so that you can better help them. I mean, I think it's very, very necessary in an industry when we're dealing with alcohol. So I appreciate that you build those relationships. And I think conversations like this and conversations like you have, just educating people with a shot of garlic or the dark water or whatever you refer to it as, that's a moment we can break away from that sip of beer, that sip philosophy that you mentioned, and to learn something else. And whether you're actually thinking of it as a break from the beer, it's a way that you as a business owner are teaching someone about something else. And I think that's actually awesome.
I think it comes down to, I think it comes down to more than just talking to our employees about their own. I think also talking to them about their customers as well, because it puts those thoughts into their head. One thing that I talked to them a lot about was responsibility and accountability. Like, if you're going to get a customer drunk or you're going to get your friends drunk, right? Who's cleaning up that mess? That's your responsibility. You're not getting paid extra to clean up after someone who's throwing up all over the place. If you come in and you're in a state where you can't work, that's your money, right? We work in an industry that's very gig-based. So if you don't have that level of responsibility within yourself, you are literally punishing yourself down the line, whether you are cleaning vomit up off the walls or, you walking out of here without a job and no referrals. So responsibility and accountability is extremely important. And it goes hand in hand with having that tip certification as well.
No, that's great advice there. And like you mentioned, overconsumption has its physical effects, it has its mental effects, and it also has financial effects. So it can really, affect you in so many different levels. And Alison, you talked about flights earlier. Flights are an interesting concept because they're an absolutely great way to try all the brewing's offerings, as many of you brewery owners, do. But, when you go to a brewery and they have a flight that consists of, say, 8 5-ounce pours, I've already got 40 ounces in me by the time I finish that. And I don't know about you guys, but when I think flight, I'm not necessarily thinking sharing. Why do we associate certain, or maybe Danii, maybe you do think of flights as sharing, but I know personally, when I get that flight, it's what I'm going to have. My wife's going to have something else. And after I have that flight, then I want to have a pint of my favorite beer. Then next thing you know, that's 56 ounces of beer or whatever it may be. And I definitely shouldn't be behind the vehicle. And that's a lot to drink in one sitting. Going back to the theme of craft beer kind of romanticizes drinking larger amounts. What can we do to let, not just the staff, but consumers know, hey, this flight's meant for 2 people? Or Alison, give them to-go samples. That way they don't, feel obligated to, overconsume themselves. So Alison, go ahead with that one.
I think we have to rethink flights in general, just like as a culture, as a beer culture of a flight is, it's funny, I'll go anywhere. It's 2020. But like when I went out, and I'd go out with my wife, Betsy, the founder of Lady Justice, she solely gets flights. And she does it intentionally to say, I want to try what you guys have. And if she sees them pouring heavily, she'll say, hey, wait, 2 ounces each. That'd be great. It's the best way to try something out. And that's when she'll be like, I will get a half pour of this. And she's super intentional about it. And like watching her model that for me has been great. I think rethinking flights in general, I know it is a pain when you are busy to have to pour flights. If you rethink the way in which you're making a flight happen to say, I want at the end of this consumer to be like, okay, this person took their time with me. They walked me through these different beer styles. I thought I hated IPAs. Turns out the one that they have, I love. And it's actually the oils and the hops. I wouldn't have known that had they not walked me through it. Like rethink the way in which you're engaging your customers to make it not just about how much money they're spending, not just about the time that you had to spend being like, God, another freaking sample. Like move past that and rethink, how am I engaging this person to make them a customer for life? We are redoing our flight boards intentionally. We have little 5-ounce glasses and we're telling our beer tenders, pour them at 2 ounces. So when we get back to the time of doing flights again, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get 5 2-ounce pours. So you will have 10 ounces of beer at the end of it. And then you get to go visit the table. Hey, what did you love? What can I get you a 13-ounce of? It just reformulates the conversation and it turns someone on to beers they might not know they like. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to make an evangelist for your business?
Andrew, I think maybe you and I had this conversation a little bit about right now, the top 2 things being searched for breweries. Number 1 is what is on their menu. And number 2, what the safety protocols are as far as social distancing, masks, all that. So that's number 1 and number 2. I think as we kind of transition back into being able to go out and engage socially, consumers are going to be looking for that same care and consideration with safety protocols as far as mask wearing and social distancing as they're going to be in how are you taking care of me as a consumer. We're not going to see bars 3-4 deep with bartenders trying to pour massive amounts of flights. We're going to have that more intimate moment to where you can sit there and say, hey, here's your 2-ounce pour of this beer. Here's why it's awesome. This beer is following it. Here's why I'm pouring this beer after this beer. And here's why. Here is your flight. Here is your enjoyment. And now why don't you have a half a glass of that beer at the back end so we can get you into a couple other beers? I think long term, looking at any sort of positive through this whole pandemic is that the way that we are going to be able to engage with customers is going to be so much more important because we need them, they need us, and us being able to show them, hey, we care about you being here. We are safe, we are secure, and we want you to be educated. Instead of, hey, let's see how quick we can get you drunk before we shove you on the next tour bus to go to the next brewery. There's going to be a lot more mindfulness, I feel, in the craft beer community as far as the care and consideration that's given to each and every customer.
Thanks, Tom. That's great points there.
Yeah, I think it's really important to really highlight your different glass sizes as well. A half pour isn't something I knew about until probably a couple of years ago, right? I've been drinking craft beer for 12 years. And I didn't know that a half pour even existed until I was living up in Seattle, and I had a bartender offer it to me at one of the breweries up there. And I was just like, oh, you can do that? Like, I had no clue. And so, going to breweries that list their different sizes of glasses and giving you the option, so you don't feel a pressure to get a 16-ounce glass and finish it all, that's super helpful, I think, for the consumer to be able to moderate a little bit better. I was in Ireland at the beginning of the year, and over there, I ordered a half pour, and I literally got made fun of extensively by a group of guys I was playing darts with. And that's just kind of how they are with each other. I don't think they actually really cared, but it was like they kind of poke at each other, and it's just part of their culture.
Did they throw darts at you?
They threatened it. No, but yeah. So I mean, it's looked down upon as a man in Ireland to get a half pour of beer. Right. And I think that is an underlying thing in our culture as well. It might not be as like outright, but I do think amongst a group of guys, it's pretty common for there to be a bit of pressure to finish a 16-ounce glass of beer and not leave some on the table. You know what I mean? So if we offer our consumers that option just up front in their face when they walk into the brewery, you can get a 2-ounce, 5-ounce, 8-ounce, and 16-ounce pour. And then kind of encourage those smaller ones for tasting, like you guys were talking about, I think is a really important part of it.
Now, everybody's thrown out such fantastic advice and insight today, but when we look at the craft beer industry as a whole, quite a few of you're brewery owners yourselves. You're running the business. It is your job to make money. And Tom, I know we talked about this on our phone call last week. Think about McDonald's telling people not to eat hamburgers or eat less hamburgers. You have to be a little tactful when you touch these subjects, because as brewery owners, you're making your living off selling beer. And of course, you want to serve a safe experience. But how are you able to balance the line of what we've talked about the past hour about safe consumption versus, that bottom line and your goal to make a living?
Two things there. A lot of people have looked at my brewery and they're like, how do you make money? And I actually make money from health, not from beer. One, I love the Coca-Cola model, not Coca-Cola, but the model. And the model is to always be training your next generation. Same thing with McDonald's. McDonald's target audience is not adults. It's the kids with those little toys. With Coca-Cola, it's kids with the Santa Claus. They're not training adults to drink their beverage or eat their food. They're training children to become indoctrinated into the brand. And I personally don't want to kill my consumers. So I want them to be there, and I want them to be there generationally. I want someone to say, I was drinking your beer and I went home and made this baby. And that baby then comes and hangs out at my bar, then grows up to have their first beer at 21 in my brewery, and then brings a date that they then get married to, and then start the cycle all over again. Like, I'm thinking like that. Those are the stories that I want to come out of my establishment. And in order to create that story, I have to have something for everyone at different phases of their life. And so when you say, okay, I make beer and I only make beer and I need to make as much money as possible, you've got to look at how you're presenting that. Are you really making as much money as possible if you're saying we're only going to sell 16 ounces of beer because that's the highest price point we can get for it, rather than selling 4 or 5 tiny portions where you can upcharge on it and actually end up making more money on the same 16 ounces of liquid just because you're selling it in smaller portions? Right? People are coming to craft beer not because they want to necessarily get intoxicated, but because they want to have an experience. Like, we have to always remember the craft part of craft beer. They want an experience. Give them that experience. So when you're looking at your bottom line, you're like, how do we make as much money as possible? Well, inclusion is how you make as much money as possible. If you continue to alienate people, push people out, and make people feel like they're not welcome, you're limiting your pool. You're limiting your consumer base to these same people who you're just going to get fucked up all the time. And then eventually they're going to start to dwindle from your consumer base because they realize they're drinking too much. They're drinking alone. They're not meeting new people, right? If I can't come to your brewery and sit down and have a great conversation and have a new mom to hang out with, or possibly meet my future spouse, why am I here? We don't go out to be with ourselves. We go out to be with community. And so as a brewery owner, I think it's important to think about the social aspects of how I make every single dollar. And like Alison, you were saying, you want to partner with nonprofits and just have 2 beers. Like when we work for corporations, we want to have more options. So it's not just limiting to 2 beers or to 2 drinks. The drinks are unlimited. It's just, what do you have? And because we have so many different things, like a lavender beer or a lavender kombucha, or, you know, this lavender syrup that you can take a shot of, people are just like, what are these things? And they're so intrigued that they're clamoring for more. And so you don't have to make your money by selling more beer or selling higher ABV or getting people shit-faced, because, you know, at the end of the day, you're gonna lose that customer and their customer base if you keep going down that particular path. Sorry for my rant. You're on mute, Andrew. Andrew, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
I thought you were just pointing at me like, you go, Andrew. I'm like, oh, now I realize what's really going on. Well, like I was saying, Danii, thank you for all that wisdom. That was absolutely fantastic. And I'm mad we actually haven't chatted before today, because I love everything you stand for. And this has been a fantastic conversation. But second, some of the words you mentioned, you talked about experience. People are going to breweries for experiences. In the current state of the world, brewery visits are so much more intentional. When I decide I'm actually going to leave my cave of an office and go somewhere, I'm going to go somewhere, Tom, where you mentioned, where I know I'm going to feel safe. I know I'm going to feel included. I know I'm going to feel welcome. Those are the places we're going to visit. And sure, you know, there's some people who might go to a billion breweries and drink a ton at each of those breweries, but I'm going to go to breweries where I feel valued and I feel they're taking care of me. And you know what? I might drink a little less each time that I go, but they're going to be one of the few breweries that I go to regularly because I respect their mission. It's not just about the beer. It's about how welcome they make me feel. And I absolutely love what you just said, Danii. So thank you for that. And because we have hit about that hour mark, you know, we're about to end 2020 as well. You know, looking at this year we've had, I like to end with one final question. And Alison, I swear it's a little bit different than the ones we were ending Panel Fest with. I want to ask all of you, you know, looking at your lives, your mental health, your consumption, your families, your job, what is your resolution for the coming year? I love to hear what's going through your mind right now of how you're going to be a better, more positive person. And Zach, because we are going in a circle, you have little time for prep right now.
That's totally fine. That's okay. I've been prepping for this my whole life, man. So yeah, we're actually as an organization, we're actually moving from the year of clarity in 2020 to the year of growth in 2021, and focusing on balanced wellness, and so mental, physical, and spiritual wellness. So as an organization, we're actually going to be, you know, constantly doing things with our community that helps to promote that, whether it's physical exercise, breath work, and meditation, or just mental health conversations with our community. And so that's how I'm personally keeping myself accountable to make sure that I also grow through the coming year. And so it's all about creating that community and that support system that encourages that amongst each other.
No, I love it. I hope we meet face to face in 2021.
Likewise, man.
Will, your turn.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for the company, it's going to be a crazy year. You know, I was just reading on Craft Beer Professionals when they think there's going to be festivals again. So we're definitely geared up to that. I think we're really trying to get to a point where I feel like everyone is feeling back to not normal, but is definitely feeling a little less hectic than they were this year. You know, our ownership likes to say we pivoted so many times, we need a new pair of shoes. So we're going to hopefully take a little bit and get a foot massage and then get a new pair of shoes on before we kind of jump into 2021. Personal resolutions for me are definitely to continue to kind of, you know, have a mindness and wellness mindset kind of going into the new year, and hopefully have a less stressful year than the previous, and be ready to tackle those challenges.
Awesome.
however they
I'm
come.
wishing you the best in 2021, Will, of course. Now, Alison, what is your resolution for the new year?
Well, it has been a rough year for everyone, but I have actually had some pretty major health issues in 2020. So I had major surgery in September, and we'll be prepping for more procedures coming up in the next few months. And that is a good kickoff reminder for me and how I reflect myself in our brewery to take care of yourself. It's very easy for me to repeatedly talk about this, and I bring it up all the time. We have always said, our former head brewer who just retired, Amy, always would say a brewery is only as good as how clean it is. And so that's been something that, like, I keep that. She means like the literal and the non-literal. So like, are you taking care of yourself? Are you taking care of others in the process? And so in my health issues, I've had to take a step back from drinking. Drinking doesn't feel good for me anymore because I've had major abdominal surgery, right? So what that means for me going forward is recognize that people who walk in the door, you don't know where they're coming from. You don't know who they are. You don't know what their story is. So ask, learn more, take the time. We've all been cooped up for a really long time. So what are the ways that we're meeting people where they are and saying, how can I help you, and meaning help, right? Not just like, what beer can I pour you? Great, get out of my space, right? Taking the time, being patient, being kind, being caring, recognizing we're all going to forget how social cues work because we've been talking to each other on a Zoom delay. Like, let's be kind, let's be patient, and be ready to change how we interact with one another, meeting each other with kindness.
No, I think kindness is much needed right now. Great stuff there, Alison, and good luck in 2021. I know we're going to talk again in a couple hours and again later, but always thinking, wishing positive vibes your way into the brewery. Tom, you're up.
Yeah, I think I'll kind of echo Alison a bit there, in the sense that a lot of really dark stuff happened behind closed doors this year that we know nothing about. There are, if you go out with a buddy and they have too much to drink at the bar and you're like, hey man, I can see something wrong. What's up? That didn't really happen. There's a lot of things that happen behind closed doors that they're going to have really direct ramifications as we do kind of step out back into the world. So I want to be real mindful of that when I do come in contact with people who I haven't seen. I want to ask those hard questions if the situation presents itself. And once again, sometimes those hard questions are actually really easy and needed. So I think that's something I'm really going to focus on, is what happened behind those closed doors throughout that past year, and how can we move forward, and how can we reconnect, and how these friendships that have kind of been put on pause, how can I foster those relationships again and kind of get back to some sense of feeling like myself again. Also, I'm sitting here with an extra 20 pounds on my stomach, frozen pizzas. And I think Danii hit this at the very, very beginning. I wasn't trying to kill myself, but also I was like, screw it. The first 5-6 months of quarantine, it was like, you know what, who cares? I don't have the motivation. I can't do this. I can't do that. And I was feeling sorry for myself. And I think it's time to stand up, dust off, and say, hey, this is time for us to be able to take a reflection of what that last year gave us, and how are we going to use some of those things to help us move forward.
Yeah, I definitely feel there are positives through all this. And you touched on a point that I'm experiencing myself. It's hard to maintain friendships during COVID when we're not having that physical face-to-face interaction. So I think, positivity, kindness, is keeping our mental health in check are very important topics that we can talk about. And even if it's through a Zoom call just like this. And Danii, last but not least, I'd love to hear your resolution for the new year.
I haven't really determined what my resolution will be. This is the week where I usually turn inward and go through the darkest days of the year and the darkest parts of my mind. It's usually a time when I pull away. I haven't been on social media. I haven't been doing any of those things. It's just been myself and my family and my thoughts. I have been checking in with people all year long. I have been visiting with people one-on-one. I have been doing all the things that I think I would put in a resolution. My husband just got me a Bowflex and a treadmill to put in our wonderful farm. So, I've been complaining about going to the gym all year, and I will now have a gym in my house. So I think if I could determine what my resolution would be now, is to listen to a book a day and walk on the treadmill at least an hour. If I have one meal a day, do 1 hour on the treadmill. If I have more meals, then that's another hour. And I gained the COVID-20. I don't feel good in my own body. I don't drink beer at home anymore. Beer is celebratory, so I don't see the point of drinking it by myself. Also, I can't have a new experience with it. So I feel like my fall experience has already been leading up to my resolution. It's not like a turning point. This will happen on January 1st. It's more of looking at what happened from the year, what I determined I want to do, and then just keep being better at it. And yeah, that was a lot of words. I'm sorry.
No, I like it. And one thing that sticks out to me is you talked about, I haven't gone to the gym like I used to before this as well. And my wife got me a little under the desk elliptical. So I'm trying to do those little things just like you, trying to bring the workout home and potentially while I'm working. I'm not doing it right now, I promise. But another thing that I love you mentioned, Danii, is you listen to a book a day. Wow, my mind is blown on that one. And that's somewhat a resolution for me.
I haven't done that yet.
Let me know how that goes, because I believe you also mentioned you have kids. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
Good luck listening to a book a day. That's all I have to say on that one. My goal is like a book a month, and I wish I could read more. But I appreciate all of you joining us today. Zach, Alison, Tom, Danii, and Will, who had to dip out a minute earlier, because these conversations are so important. I mean, they mean so much to me just to have this conversation and get the opportunity. I guess Alison had to dip out as well, to have this insight from all of you and to everybody listening. I think all the points all of you mentioned are fantastic. And, these are things we need to talk about. Have conversations with your coworkers, your bosses, your friends, anyone in your life who can relate to you. We've all had a really tough year. It's going to get better. I mean, you've made it through 2020 at this point, and I look forward to sharing a beer with all of you and better times in 2021. So thank you all again for being here today and just sharing with the group on this extremely important topic. And I hope everybody takes the new year, starts safe, and has a resolution yourself to have a better year in 2021. So thank you guys for being here today, and here's my goodbye. See you in 2021.
Cheers, y'all.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.